The billionaire was stunned when the black delivery lady's son called him Dad. "Security! Remove this imposter immediately. He has no right to be at this event." "I have every right to be here, Mr. Carlton. More right than you might realize." The grand ballroom of the Westlake Charity Gala fell silent. Crystal chandeliers glittered overhead as hundreds of New York's elite turned to stare at the confrontation unfolding at the entrance. Thomas Carlton, his 73-year-old frame still commanding respect in a tailored tuxedo, glared at the younger man who had dared to challenge him. Marcus Johnson stood his ground, tall and composed in a suit that was clearly rented but dignified. At 35, his dark skin contrasted with the sea of predominantly white faces around him. His mother, Amara Johnson, stepped forward from behind him, still wearing her delivery uniform with Johnson's local courier embroidered on the pocket. "Mr. Carlton," Amara said, her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands, "we wouldn't be here if it wasn't absolutely necessary." Thomas's security personnel moved toward Marcus, but Thomas raised a hand to stop them, curiosity momentarily overriding his indignation. "You have exactly 30 seconds to explain yourself before I have you both escorted out and charged with trespassing," Thomas growled. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded document. "According to this DNA test, I'm your son." The room erupted in gasps and whispers. Thomas's face drained of color as he stared at the paper, then at Amara, recognition slowly dawning in his eyes. "Impossible," he whispered, but the uncertainty in his voice betrayed him. Billionaire Carlton, Thomas's daughter and the event's organizer, pushed through the crowd. "Dad, what's going on?" But let's go back to how this all started. It was just 3 hours earlier when Amara Johnson picked up her last delivery of the day. Amara Johnson checked her watch as she loaded the small package into her delivery van. 4:35. If traffic cooperated, she could make this final delivery and still have time to prepare dinner before meeting Marcus at the hospital for his appointment. At 54, Amara's face showed the lines of a woman who had worked hard her entire life. Her hair, pulled back in a practical bun, had more gray than black these days, but her eyes remained bright and determined. The small courier company she had built from nothing over 20 years was finally stable, though never quite profitable enough to provide the kind of medical care her son now needed. The radio played Aretha Franklin's Respect as Amara navigated through Manhattan traffic. She hummed along, the song taking her back to her youth in the late 70s when possibilities had seemed endless. Her phone rang through the car speaker. "Mom, it's me," Marcus's voice filled the vehicle. "I'm on my way to my last delivery, baby. Everything okay with your appointment?" Amara asked, concern edging her voice. "That's why I'm calling. Dr. Patterson says he's found a potential match for the transplant." Marcus paused, his voice tight with emotion. "But I need to tell you something first. Something I discovered." "What is it, Marcus?" Amara slowed the van, pulling to the curb. "Remember those old letters you kept in the cedar box, the ones from when you worked at the Carlton mansion?" Amara's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Marcus, what have you done?" "I needed to know, Mom, with this diagnosis. I needed answers about my father, the letters, the dates they lined up. So I did one of those ancestry DNA tests." The world seemed to stop around Amara. She had kept that secret for 35 years. Thomas Carlton's DNA is in their database from some genetic longevity study his company participated in. "The match is conclusive, Mom. He's my father." Amara closed her eyes, memories flooding back of that summer in 1989. She had been a 20-year-old housekeeper in the Carlton mansion, putting herself through nursing school. Thomas Carlton had been in his 30s then, newly married but already showing signs of the ruthlessness that would make him billions in technology and real estate. "Does he know?" she finally asked. "No, but Mom, he might be the only match for the bone marrow I need. The DNA is rare." Marcus's voice broke. "I have to talk to him." "Where are you now?" Amara asked, already knowing the answer. "Outside his office building. He's not here. His assistant said he's attending some charity thing tonight." "Mom, I think I'm going there." "Marcus, wait for me, please. Let me finish this delivery and I'll meet you." Amara's mind raced. "It's at the Westlake Hotel, isn't it, the gala?" "Yes, 7 o'clock. I'll meet you outside at 6:30. We'll figure this out together. Promise me you won't go in alone." After Marcus agreed, Amara completed her delivery with mechanical efficiency, her mind 35 years in the past. She had never told Thomas about the pregnancy. By the time she realized, he had already shown his true colors, firing her when his wife became suspicious, threatening legal action if she caused trouble. She left with nothing but her dignity and the life growing inside her. She raised Marcus alone, working multiple jobs while finishing her education. When nursing proved too demanding alongside single motherhood, she pivoted to deliveries, eventually starting her own small business. Through it all, she kept Thomas Carlton's name off Marcus's birth certificate and out of their lives. Until now. At 6:25, Amara parked her van near the Westlake Hotel. The evening air held the first chill of autumn as she spotted Marcus pacing nervously on the sidewalk. He looked so much like his father, the same strong jaw, the same determined eyes, though Marcus had her darker complexion and gentle nature. "Mom, I'm scared," he admitted when she reached him. Amara straightened his tie. "I know, baby, but whatever happens in there, we face it together, like we always have." They watched as limousines and luxury cars disgorged Manhattan's wealthiest citizens. Women in designer gowns and men in tuxedos strode past them as if they were invisible. "The Invitational Gala is raising money for children's cancer research," Marcus explained, having researched the event. "Ironic, isn't it? He'll donate millions tonight to save children he's never met while I'm dying without his help." "You're not dying," Amara said sharply. "We'll find another donor." "There isn't time, Mom, you know that." Amara looked at her son, her brilliant, kind son who had worked his way through college, who volunteered teaching mathematics to underprivileged kids, who never complained even when the leukemia diagnosis came 3 months ago. She thought of all the birthdays Thomas Carlton had missed, all the school plays he hadn't attended, all the nights she'd worked double shifts while he accumulated billions. "Let's go," she said. They walked toward the entrance where security was checking invitations. Marcus straightened his shoulders, and for a moment Amara saw something of Thomas in him, that same unflinching confidence when facing a challenge. "We don't have invitations," Marcus told the security guard, "but I need to speak with Thomas Carlton. It's a family matter." The guard looked them over, his expression making clear what he thought of Amara's delivery uniform and Marcus's rented suit. "No invitation, no entry. Please," Amara said. "Just tell Mr. Carlton that Amara Johnson needs to speak with him. He'll remember the name. Lady, Mr. Carlton doesn't take unscheduled meetings, especially not during charity events. Now please step aside." It was then that Thomas himself walked past the entrance, escorting a silver-haired woman in an emerald gown. Marcus moved quickly. "Mr. Carlton." Thomas turned, irritation flashing across his face as he took in Marcus and Amara. "Mr. Carlton, I need to speak with you urgently," Marcus continued, stepping forward despite the security guard moving to intercept him. And that was when Thomas Carlton uttered the words that began our story. "Security, remove this imposter immediately. He has no right to be at this event. You can't just walk away from this." In the hallway, Thomas paused. "What would you have me do, Alina?" "Suddenly embrace a stranger as my son? Start playing happy families?" "Of course not, but we need to control this situation legally. If word gets out, is that all you're concerned about? The company's stock price?" Thomas snapped, surprising himself with the sharpness of his tone. Alina stepped back, hurt flashing across her face. "I'm concerned about you, Dad, about our family. Mom's only been gone 3 years, and now this." The mention of Catherine softened Thomas. His wife of 33 years had died of ovarian cancer, the same disease that had taken his mother. The irony of another cancer now threatening the son he never knew wasn't lost on him. "I need to be alone tonight," he said more gently. "We'll figure this out tomorrow." As his limousine pulled away from the medical building, Thomas watched the city lights blur through the window. The car passed a billboard for Carlton Technologies' latest innovation, a medical device that had made him another billion last year. The slogan read, "Creating a healthier future for families everywhere." The words now seemed to mock him. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the windows of Thomas's penthouse as he nursed a cup of coffee, having barely slept. The DNA test results lay on the kitchen counter where he'd left them after reading them for the 20th time during the night. His phone rang Richard Lawson. "Dr. Chen called," Richard said without greeting. "She has the compatibility results." "And?" Thomas asked, his throat suddenly dry. "You're a match, sir, an exceptionally good one." Thomas closed his eyes, unsure whether to feel relief or deeper anxiety. "What happens now? What does the donation involve?" Dr. Chen says it's a relatively straightforward procedure. They collect stem cells through a blood draw after you take medication for a few days to boost production. Sometimes they need to extract directly from bone marrow, but that's less common now. Pain level: minimal for the blood draw method. Some discomfort for a few days from the medication. If they need to go the bone marrow route, moderate pain for a day or two, nothing you can't handle. Thomas nodded, though Richard couldn't see him. "Set up a meeting with all parties at my office for noon." After hanging up, Thomas walked to the wall of windows overlooking Central Park. The trees were beginning to show hints of fall colors. How many autumns had Marcus seen without him? How many birthdays and Christmases? The weight of those missed years pressed down on Thomas's shoulders. The doorbell rang, surprising him. Few people had access to his private elevator. When he opened the door, Eleanor stood there, looking as if she hadn't slept either. "I thought we could ride to the office together," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. She stopped when she saw the DNA results on the counter. "You brought those home?" "I needed to process this, Eleanor." Thomas returned to the window. Eleanor followed him. "Dad, I've been thinking about this all night. We need to approach this strategically. First, ironclad NDAs, then a settlement offer enough to cover his medical expenses, maybe a bit more for goodwill, but structured to ensure no future claims." "You make it sound like a corporate takeover." "In a way, it is," Eleanor replied pragmatically. "We're protecting Carlton interests." Thomas turned to face his daughter. "When did you become so cold?" Eleanor blinked in surprise. "I learned from the best, Dad. You've always taught me to protect the family and the business above all else." The words hit Thomas like a physical blow. Was this how his daughter saw him? As someone who valued business over humanity? Worse, was she right? He thought of Catherine. Though theirs had been a practical marriage at first, they had grown to love each other deeply over time. She had softened his rougher edges, encouraged his philanthropy. What would she think of this situation, of the son he had never acknowledged? "Richard called," Thomas said. "I'm a match for the bone marrow donation." Eleanor's expression tightened. "Are you seriously considering doing it?" "A young man's life is at stake, Eleanor, my son's life." "You don't owe him anything," Eleanor said sharply. "She kept him from you for 35 years. That was her choice." "A choice I forced on her," Thomas replied quietly. "I remember what I said to her, Eleanor. I threatened her with legal action if she caused trouble. I was so focused on my ambitions, on the life I was building with your mother, that I couldn't see past my own self-interest." Eleanor stared at her father, clearly struggling to reconcile this introspective man with the ruthless businessman she knew. "This isn't like you, Dad. Since when do you admit fault?" "Since I found out I have a son I never knew." Thomas moved away from the window. "We should head to the office. I've called a meeting for noon." "What are you going to do?" Eleanor asked, following him to the elevator. Thomas pressed the button for the garage level. The right thing for once. The Carlton Technologies executive conference room seemed particularly cavernous that afternoon. Thomas sat at the head of the table with Eleanor and Richard flanking him. Across from them sat Amara and Marcus, both looking exhausted but determined. "Thank you for coming," Thomas began formally. "I've reviewed the test results. As you know, the paternity test is positive, and Dr. Chen confirms that I'm a viable donor for the bone marrow Marcus needs." "So you'll do it?" Marcus asked, hope evident in his voice. "Yes," Thomas said simply. Eleanor shifted beside him but remained silent. Amara's expression revealed nothing. "Before we proceed," Thomas continued, "my legal team has prepared some documents." Marcus tensed visibly. "What kind of documents?" Thomas slid a folder across the table. "Not what you're thinking. These are documents legally acknowledging you as my son. There's a medical proxy authorizing the donation procedure and papers to amend your birth certificate if you wish." The room fell silent. Marcus stared at the folder as if it might bite him. "What's the catch?" Amara asked, breaking the silence. "No catch," Thomas replied. "No NDAs, no silence money, no conditions." Eleanor made a small sound of protest, but Thomas silenced her with a look. "Why?" Marcus asked, still not touching the folder. "Why acknowledge me now? Because I'm sick." Thomas considered the question carefully. "Partly, yes. The thought of you dying when I could help is unacceptable, but it's more than that. Learning about you has forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about myself and the life I've lived. I can't undo the past 35 years, but I can try to do better going forward." "Just like that?" Amara's voice held justified skepticism. "After one night of soul-searching, you're a changed man." "Hardly," Thomas admitted. "I'm still the same flawed person, but now I have a choice to make about what kind of man I want to be for whatever time I have left." He looked directly at Marcus. "And what kind of father I want to be if you'll let me." Marcus finally reached for the folder, opening it carefully. "This doesn't obligate me to anything." "Nothing. You can take my name or not. You can have a relationship with me or not. Those are your choices to make." Marcus studied the documents, then looked up at Thomas. "I didn't come here expecting this. I just wanted a chance at life." "I understand," Thomas said. "The donation is unconditional. Everything else is up to you." Eleanor stood abruptly. "I need some air." She left the room, the door closing firmly behind her. "She needs time," Thomas explained, though no one had asked. "This is a lot for her to process, too." Amara watched him with calculating eyes. "You hurt her by doing this." "Yes," Thomas acknowledged, "but it would hurt her more in the long run if I continued being the man who would deny his own son to protect his reputation." Marcus closed the folder. "I'd like my attorney to review these before I sign anything." Of course, Thomas agreed. In the meantime, Dr. Chen has scheduled the preliminary procedures for tomorrow morning. I've already signed the medical consent forms. Thank you, Marcus said simply. Thomas nodded. An awkward silence fell over the room. Tell me about yourself, Thomas finally said. Beyond what's in the background check I'm sure my people ran last night. A smile tugged at the corner of Marcus's mouth. You did have me investigated. Old habits, Thomas admitted. Not much to tell that wouldn't be in your report. I teach mathematics at City College. I volunteer with an after-school program in Harlem. I was engaged once, but it didn't work out. Marcus paused. I have your affinity for numbers, apparently. Mom says I was calculating tip percentages when I was 5. Pride, unexpected and powerful, surged through Thomas. Your mother did an excellent job raising you. She did everything, Marcus agreed, glancing at Amara with obvious affection. Amara stood. Marcus, we should go. You have a doctor's appointment at 3. As they prepared to leave, the door opened and Alina returned, her expression carefully controlled. I apologize for my behavior, she said formally. Marcus nodded acknowledgement. This isn't easy for anyone. Alina stepped forward, offering her hand. Regardless of how this came about, it appears we're related. I'd like to start over if possible. Marcus shook her hand. I'd like that too. As they left, Richard approached Thomas. The press is asking about the disturbance at the gala last night. What should I tell them? Thomas watched through the glass walls as Marcus and Amara waited for the elevator. Tell them I was reunited with a family member I hadn't seen in many years. No further details at this time. And the board? Richard pressed. I'll address them personally after the donation procedure. Richard hesitated, then said, I'm proud of you, Thomas. Catherine would be too. Thomas wasn't so sure about that. Catherine had never known about Amara. Would she have understood, forgiven him? He would never know. Alina rejoined him as Richard left. I meant what I said in there. I want to try to accept this situation. Thank you, Thomas said. That means a lot to me. But Dad, she continued, her voice tightening, I can't help feeling like Mom's memory is being, I don't know, tarnished. You were married when he was conceived. Thomas nodded slowly. I betrayed your mother's trust. That's a fact I've lived with for 35 years. But Catherine was a compassionate woman. I think given time, she would have found a way to accept Marcus, especially knowing the circumstances. And what were those circumstances exactly? Alina asked. Were you in love with her? Was it just a fling? Thomas moved to the windows overlooking the Manhattan skyline. I wasn't in love with her, though I should have treated her with more respect. Your mother and I were going through a difficult time. We'd been trying to have a child for years without success. Alina looked surprised. I never knew that. We didn't talk about it, not even with each other, really. It was a different time. Thomas sighed. Then 3 months after Amara left, your mother discovered she was pregnant with you. It seemed like a miracle. We were so focused on our joy that I put Amara out of my mind, convinced myself that chapter was closed. And now it's reopened, Alina said softly. Life has a way of making us face our mistakes eventually, Thomas replied. But you should know that you were never a replacement, Alina. You were always wanted and loved exactly as you are. Alina's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I know, Dad, I know. The hospital room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors. Thomas lay in the bed, feeling strangely vulnerable in the hospital gown. The stem cell collection procedure had taken longer than expected, nearly 5 hours of lying still, while his blood was processed through a machine that removed the needed cells. A soft knock on the door preceded Amara's entrance. She looked as uncomfortable as Thomas felt. Marcus asked me to check on you, she said, remaining near the door. They're prepping him now. I'm fine, Thomas assured her. Just tired. How is he? Nervous but optimistic. Amara fidgeted with the strap of her purse. The doctors say the donation quality is excellent. They're very hopeful. Thomas nodded. Good, that's good. An awkward silence fell between them. You didn't have to stay, Amara finally said. The nurses could have called with updates. I wanted to stay, Thomas replied. Want to see this through? Amara studied him. You've changed. Have I? Thomas attempted a smile. Or am I just finally facing consequences I should have faced decades ago? Maybe both. Amara moved further into the room. For what it's worth, I did try to tell you. Thomas looked up sharply. When? A week after you fired me, I called your office 3 times. Your secretary said you were unavailable. Then I received a letter from your attorney warning me about harassment. I took the hint. The revelation hit Thomas like a physical blow. I never knew you called. My first secretary was at Beverly? Amara nodded. She screened all my calls rigorously, too rigorously it seems. Thomas closed his eyes briefly. I'm sorry, Amara, for all of it, how I treated you back then, what I said to you. Water under the bridge now, Amara said, though her tone suggested the water still ran deep. What matters is Marcus. He's a remarkable young man. You did an amazing job raising him. Had good role models, Amara said. My father, my brothers, men who showed up and did what needed doing. The implied criticism wasn't lost on Thomas. I would have helped Amara if I'd known. Would you? Amara challenged. The ambitious young Thomas Carlton I knew was building an empire. Would you really have acknowledged a child with the black housekeeper, risked your perfect marriage and your social standing? Thomas wanted to protest, to claim he would have done the right thing, but honesty prevailed. I don't know, I hope I would have, but I can't say for certain. The man I was then had different priorities. Amara seemed to appreciate his candor. Well, the man you are now is saving my son's life. That counts for something. Another knock at the door revealed Alina. The nurse says you can be discharged, Dad. I've brought you a change of clothes. Thank you, Thomas said. He turned back to Amara. Please keep me updated on Marcus's condition. I will, Amara promised, moving toward the door. She paused beside Alina. Your father needs to rest after the procedure. Make sure he does. Alina nodded, a tentative understanding passing between the two women. After Amara left, Alina helped Thomas gather his things. You like her, she observed. I respect her, Thomas corrected. She raised an extraordinary son under difficult circumstances I helped create. And Marcus, do you like him? Thomas considered the question as he changed behind the privacy screen. I don't really know him yet, but yes, what I've seen so far I like very much. He has your analytical mind, Alina said. We talked while you were in the procedure. Did you know he developed a mathematical model for predicting urban traffic patterns? Several cities have adopted it. Pride swelled in Thomas's chest. I didn't know that. He's been offered positions at major tech firms but prefers teaching, says it's more rewarding. Alina handed Thomas his jacket. Sound like anyone you know? Thomas smiled ruefully. My father. He turned down countless corporate positions to remain a professor at Columbia. Your father was a math professor, Alina asked, surprised. You've never mentioned that. We had a complicated relationship. He thought I sold out by going into business. Thomas straightened his tie. Ready to go? As they walked through the hospital corridors, Thomas found himself glancing at room numbers, wondering which one held Marcus. He's in the transplant unit, Alina said, reading his thoughts. Different floor, security clearance required because his immune system will be compromised. Thomas nodded. Of course. Amara has my number. She'll call with updates. Alina steered him toward the exit. Right now, you need to rest. Outside, Richard waited with the car. Everything went well, sir. As well as can be expected, Thomas replied, settling into the back seat beside Alina. As the car pulled away from the hospital, Thomas watched the building recede in the window. Somewhere inside, his son was receiving the cells that might save his life, the cells that proved their connection beyond any doubt. I need to go to the office tomorrow, Thomas announced. Dad, the doctor said to take it easy for at least 3 days, Alina protested. Not for work. I need to update my will. Alina stared at him. Your will. Dad, this is hardly the time. It's exactly the time, Thomas interrupted. I have another child, Alina. My estate planning needs to reflect that reality. You barely know him, Alina said carefully. And the donation is one thing, but changing your will is the right thing to do, Thomas finished firmly. I'm not suggesting equal shares of everything. The controlling interest in Carlton Technologies will remain with you as planned, but Marcus deserves recognition. Alina's expression revealed her struggle. This is happening so fast. For you, perhaps. For Marcus and Amara, it's been a lifetime of absence and unanswered questions. And for you, Alina asked. Thomas looked out at the city passing by. For me, it's a chance to correct a grievous mistake before it's too late. 1 week passed, then 2. Thomas received regular updates from Amara about Marcus's condition, initially encouraging, then concerning as complications arose, then cautiously optimistic again. The donated cells were finally beginning to engraft, the doctors reported. The next few days would be critical. Thomas immersed himself in work during the day, but his nights were restless. He found himself thinking constantly about the son he'd never known, imagining what Marcus had been like as a child, as a teenager, as a young man finding his way in the world. All those moments lost forever. When Amara called on the 17th day after the transplant, Thomas was in a board meeting. Excuse me, he said, rising immediately upon seeing her name on his phone. He stepped out of the conference room, aware of the curious glances that followed him. Amara, how is he? The doctors say he's turned a corner. Amara's voice was thick with emotion. The new cells are functioning. His counts are improving. They're calling it a success, Thomas. Relief flooded through him so powerfully that he had to lean against the wall for support. Thank God. When can I see him? He's still in isolation, but he's asking for you. They can arrange a visit tomorrow if you follow the infection protocols. I'll be there, Thomas promised. What time? After confirming the details, Thomas returned to the boardroom, aware that his face must show the emotional impact of the call. "Everything all right, Thomas?" asked Howard Green, the board chairman. "Yes," Thomas replied, resuming his seat. "Very good news, in fact. My son's transplant appears to be successful." The board members exchanged confused glances. As far as they knew, Thomas had only a daughter. "Perhaps we should address the rumors that have been circulating," Thomas continued, seizing the moment. 3 weeks ago, I learned that I have a 35-year-old son. He needed a bone marrow transplant, which I was able to provide. The Carlton Technologies family is now one member larger, and I expect everyone to treat this news with the respect and discretion it deserves. Stunned silence greeted this announcement. "Now, shall we continue with the quarterly projections?" Thomas opened his folder, his tone making it clear that the subject was closed for discussion. Eleanor, seated to his right, gave him a small nod of approval. The transplant isolation room was bathed in artificial light, making it impossible to tell the time of day. Marcus looked pale against the white sheets, thinner than when Thomas had last seen him, but his eyes were alert. Thomas, wearing the required mask, gown, and gloves, approached the bed cautiously. "You look better than I expected," he said, immediately regretting the clumsy greeting. Marcus managed a small smile. "You should have seen me 3 days ago." His voice was weak but steady. "Thank you for coming and for—" He gestured vaguely at himself, "all of this." "No need for thanks," Thomas said, taking the chair beside the bed. "How are you feeling?" "Like I've been hit by a truck, but the doctors say that's normal. The worst part is the boredom." Thomas nodded in understanding. "I brought something for that." He held up a small electronic device. "It's a prototype from our R&D department. Digital chess, Go, backgammon, and about 50 other strategy games. Hospital approved, no Wi-Fi signals to interfere with equipment." Marcus accepted the gift with genuine interest. "This isn't on the market yet, is it? I haven't seen anything like it." "No, it's still in development. We're working on making it accessible for rehabilitation centers. The interface can be adjusted for limited mobility or vision." Thomas hesitated. "I remember reading in your background that you were a chess champion in college." "You did do your homework," Marcus observed. He examined the device. "The design is elegant, simple but versatile. Like all good mathematics," Thomas said. Marcus looked up, surprised. "That's what I always tell my students." An unexpected connection, bridging 35 years of separation. Thomas felt a tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with the stem cell donation. "I heard you made quite an announcement to your board," Marcus said, changing the subject. "News travels fast. Mom told me she seemed impressed." Thomas raised an eyebrow. "That must have taken some doing. She's coming around." Marcus adjusted his position slightly, wincing. "She said you've changed." "I'm trying to," Thomas admitted, "not always successfully." They talked for almost an hour, careful conversation that skirted the edges of deeper waters. Marcus spoke about his teaching, his research. Thomas shared stories about Eleanor as a child, about the early days of building his company. Neither mentioned the years of absence or the circumstances of Marcus's birth. When a nurse came to check Marcus's vitals, Thomas prepared to leave. "Will you come again?" Marcus asked, the question carrying more weight than its simple words suggested. "If you want me to," Thomas replied. Marcus nodded. "I'd like that. Maybe we could try out that chess program." "I should warn you, I'm pretty good." "So am I," Marcus countered with a hint of Carlton competitiveness. As Thomas left the hospital, he found Amara waiting near the entrance, a coffee cup clutched in her hands. "You're still here," he said, surprised. "I just stepped out for some caffeine, been here since 6 this morning." Amara looked exhausted but determined, a mother standing guard. "How about a real meal?" Thomas suggested. "There's a decent restaurant across the street, my treat." Amara hesitated, then nodded. 15 minutes, then I need to get back." The restaurant was quiet in the late afternoon lull. Thomas and Amara settled into a booth away from other diners. "How did you find him?" Amara asked after they'd ordered. "Really? Thoughtful, intelligent, remarkably free of bitterness considering the circumstances." Thomas stirred his coffee absently. "He reminds me of my father." "Your father?" "A mathematics professor at Columbia, brilliant man, principled to a fault." Thomas smiled at a distant memory. "He disowned me when I dropped out of the PhD program to start my first company, said I was wasting my gifts on the pursuit of wealth." "Was he right?" Amara asked. Thomas considered the question seriously. "Partly. I've accomplished things that have changed the world for the better, medical technologies that have saved lives, but I've also compromised my principles more times than I care to admit, cut corners, stepped on people." He met her gaze directly. "Hurt people who didn't deserve it." "Like me," Amara said flatly. "Yes," Thomas acknowledged. "Like you." Their food arrived, creating a brief pause in the conversation. What happens after Marcus recovers? Amara finally asked. You go back to your life, he goes back to his. That depends on Marcus, Thomas replied. And on you? Me, what do I have to do with it? You're his mother. Your opinion matters to him. If you think I should keep my distance, is that what you want? Amara interrupted. To keep your distance? Thomas set down his fork. No, I've missed 35 years. I don't want to miss any more if I can help it. Amara studied him as if trying to reconcile this Thomas Carlton with the younger man she had known. Alina came to see me yesterday, she said. This surprised Thomas. She didn't mention that. She wanted to know about Marcus's childhood, asked to see pictures. Amara smiled slightly. She's trying, Thomas, for your sake. She's a remarkable woman, like her mother. Amara nodded. Catherine was always kind to me, even when she suspected something was going on. She didn't deserve what happened. No, she didn't, Thomas agreed somberly. For what it's worth, Amara said after a pause, I think you should be part of Marcus's life. He needs to know you, to understand where he comes from. And you, what do you need, Amara? The question seemed to catch her off guard. No one's asked me that in a very long time. She considered it seriously. I need to know that you won't hurt him, that this isn't just guilt or novelty that will wear off when things get complicated. I can't promise I'll never hurt him, Thomas said honestly. I'm still learning how to be a decent human being, let alone a father, but I can promise I won't abandon him again, not by choice. Amara nodded slowly. That's a start. 3 months later, the Carlton Technologies annual holiday gala was in full swing. The same ballroom where Marcus had first confronted Thomas now glittered with festive decorations. Thomas stood near the entrance, greeting board members and executives as they arrived. Alina appeared at his side, elegant in a burgundy gown. They're here, she murmured. Thomas turned to see Marcus and Amara entering the ballroom. Marcus still moved carefully. The recovery process was ongoing, but his color had returned, and he stood straighter than he had in months. Amara, wearing a silver dress that Thomas suspected was new for the occasion, looked both elegant and slightly uncomfortable. You invited them? Thomas asked Alina, pleasantly surprised. Of course, Alina replied. They're family. The simple statement, delivered without hesitation, moved Thomas deeply. Over the past months, Alina had gradually warmed to the idea of having a half-brother. Their relationship remained tentative but was growing stronger with each interaction. Thomas moved to greet them. You look well, he told Marcus, resisting the urge to embrace him. Their relationship, too, was still finding its footing. Getting stronger every day, Marcus confirmed. The doctors are pleased with my progress. And your classes, Thomas asked. Starting again after New Year's, part-time at first. Marcus glanced around the ballroom. Quite a difference from the last time I was here. Indeed, Thomas agreed. No security guards this time. The shared joke eased the tension slightly. Richard Lawson approached with champagne flutes on a tray. Sparkling cider for Mr. Johnson as requested, he said, offering the alcohol-free option to Marcus, who was still on medication. Thank you, Richard, Marcus said, taking the glass. Alina guided Amara toward a group of women near the orchestra. Let me introduce you to some people, she said, leaving Thomas and Marcus momentarily alone. Your mother seems to be adapting well, Thomas observed. She's tougher than she looks, Marcus replied. Always has been, Thomas nodded. Alina tells me you've been consulting on the traffic pattern algorithm for the city. Just a few hours a week, it keeps my mind sharp while I recover. I've read your paper on it. Brilliant work. Marcus looked surprised. You read mathematical journals. I started as a mathematician, remember, before the business world corrupted me, Thomas said with a self-deprecating smile. Mom said your father was a mathematician, too. Yes, he would have liked you. Thomas hesitated, then added, I've been thinking about establishing a mathematics scholarship at Columbia, in your name if you'd allow it. Marcus considered this. For underprivileged students, precisely, those who might not otherwise have the opportunity. I'd be honored, Marcus said sincerely. The orchestra began playing What a Wonderful World, the Louis Armstrong classic filling the ballroom. Across the room, Amara was deep in conversation with the head of Carlton's charitable foundation, gesturing animatedly in a way that suggested she was advocating for something she believed in passionately. She's lobbying for expanded healthcare access in underserved neighborhoods, Marcus explained, following Thomas's gaze. She's been doing research. She'll find Diane a willing ally, Thomas replied. We've been working on a similar initiative, Marcus smiled. Mom's never been one to waste an opportunity. Like mother, like son, Thomas observed, recalling their first confrontation. Speaking of opportunities, Marcus said, his tone becoming more serious, I wanted to thank you for the trust fund offer, but I've decided to decline. Thomas frowned. May I ask why? I appreciate the gesture, truly, but I've managed on my own this long. I'd rather make my way based on what I can contribute. Marcus met Thomas's gaze directly. I don't want anything to complicate what we're building. This is about family, not finances. Thomas felt a surge of respect for his son. I understand, but the offer remains open should you ever change your mind, and I hope you'll at least allow me to cover any ongoing medical expenses. That I can accept, Marcus agreed, though I hope to be back on my university insurance soon. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as they were joined by board members curious to meet Thomas Carlton's newly acknowledged son. Marcus handled the attention with grace and humor, neither apologizing for his existence nor flaunting his connection to the Carlton fortune. Later in the evening, as the celebration continued around them, Thomas found himself standing with Amara near the windows overlooking the city lights. Marcus seems to be hitting it off with Alina's husband, Amara observed, watching the two men laughing together across the room. James is a good man. They share an interest in urban planning. Thomas hesitated, then added, Marcus told me he declined the trust fund. Amara nodded. He told me he was going to. I tried to talk him out of it, actually. You did, Thomas was surprised. He deserves it, Thomas, all those years when we struggled, when I had to choose between paying for his college applications or fixing the car, between his textbooks or our electricity bill. Amara's voice held no accusation, just the weariness of difficult memories. I can never make that up to either of you, Thomas said quietly. No, you can't, Amara agreed, but you can be here now, that's what matters to him. They stood in companionable silence, watching their son engaged in animated conversation, alive and recovering and beginning to forge connections with a family he never knew he had. Would you dance with me, Amara? Thomas asked suddenly. For old time's sake. Amara looked startled, then thoughtful. We never actually danced together before, Thomas. Another mistake to rectify, then. After a moment's hesitation, Amara placed her hand in his. One dance, for old time's sake. As they moved onto the dance floor, Thomas caught Alina's eye across the room. She raised her glass slightly in acknowledgement, her expression a complex mixture of emotions but with acceptance at its core. Marcus, noticing his parents dancing, broke into a genuine smile, perhaps the first unburdened smile Thomas had seen from him. 1 year ago, Thomas Carlton would never have imagined this scene, dancing with a woman he had wronged decades ago, reconnecting with a son he never knew existed, watching his daughter gradually expand her definition of family to include them both. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward moments, careful conversations, boundaries being negotiated. But it was real, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, Thomas Carlton felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Now, back to where we started, in the ballroom where Marcus first confronted Thomas with those life-changing words. According to this DNA test, I'm your son. What had begun as a desperate attempt to save a life had become something none of them expected, a chance at healing, not just for Marcus's body, but for all their souls. A family fractured by the past, now tentatively reaching toward a future together. As the gala continued around them, Thomas looked at the faces of his family, Alina, who had found the grace to share her father, Marcus, who had found the courage to claim his heritage, and Amara, who had found the strength to forgive. In their eyes, he saw not the billionaire, not the corporate titan, but simply a father, a man trying at long last to do right by the people who mattered most. Thank you for listening. If this story touched you, please consider subscribing and share your thoughts in the comments.